Hey there, HorseCenter fans. Matt and I are back with another exciting edition of the show, Matt. We are talking Kentucky Derby, the road to the Kentucky Derby. We're talking New York, California, and South Florida today.
That is true, Brian. I don't know. I feel like we should be seeing things a little more clearly than we are on the Derby trail at this point, Brian. Happy 2020.
Give it time, Matt. We're still 4 months away, but we are talking Jerome, the undefeated winner of the Jerome. Mucho Macho Man will chance it rule in South Florida, and Mr. Baffert has a strong hand in the Sham. Watch it all right now on HorseCenter. Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the terrific pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Schiffman. How are you today, Matt?
I am good, Brian. We got a lot of Kentucky Derby trail stuff to talk about. The Jerome on January 1st just happened, and a couple races this Saturday.
And Matt, before we started the show off air, we were talking about a potential top 10 list for the Kentucky Derby. At this point, sir, I'm just going to shake my head a little bit. I really don't know, but I'm wondering if the horse you saw Wednesday, New Year's Day, at Aqueduct is one of your top 10. Let's talk a little bit about Independence Hall before we preview these other races.
Well, I would certainly have to put him in my top 10 at this point, because at least we've seen him run a couple of races that have recency. So many of the other prominent names are recovering from bumps and bruises and growth issues and things like that, and we need to see them get back on the racetrack. But I will tell you what, Brian Zipsy, I've been in a lot of paddocks for a lot of big races at a lot of places over the years, and I have never seen anything like Independence Hall in the paddock at Aqueduct before the race. Holy moly, Brian, was that horse full of himself, and was he a handful?
Well, he's a grandson of Tappet. I guess there's a little bit of that going on. But hey, Independence Hall has showed issues before, saddling or at the starting gate. But I guess this Jerome there at that little outdoor paddock they have right next to the racetrack was a little bit worse. What you're saying, it was worse than usual.
Oh yeah, it was a lot worse, and I don't know if people are aware of the fact that they brought him to Aqueduct several days before the race because they wanted to get him time to settle in. They schooled him in the paddock at Aqueduct, which, as you described, is kind of a unique setting every single day, and he was fine. But trainer Michael Trombetta kind of described this horse as a little bit of a smart aleck. He knows what's going on, and he knew in the morning it was just what it was. It was schooling, and he knew on Wednesday afternoon that it was race day, and he was just a tiger out there. And it was interesting. He wasn't sweaty and nervous at all by any means. He was just aggressive.
Ornery, downright ornery. It looked like from some of the pictures and some of the words I heard, and now the best description yet from Matt Schiffman on the scene there at Aqueduct on Wednesday. Let's talk about the horse as far as a runner after he gets over some of these things. Now, again, in the Jerome, and maybe the worst yet, he broke pretty poorly. He broke last in the Jerome, and despite the paddock issue, he was 1-9 in the Jerome, but he broke last. And there wasn't a lot in this field as far as proven commodities, and he never really looked like the break was going to cost him. But we're talking about a couple of big issues here with a horse who is generally on the top, near the top of most Kentucky Derby lists, 3 for 3 now, the Michael Trombetta trained Independence Hall. So clearly there are some things he's got to work through. But then he took over the race. He moved to the outside, heavy favorite, stayed out of trouble the rest of the way. I don't know how good yet. Maybe the horses that were at least competitive with him early in the stretch, Prince of Pharaohs and Bourbon Bay, are decent horses. We'll have to wait and see. But it wasn't quite like the Nashua as far as the ease of victory.
No, it wasn't. And I think a couple things you hinted out there were absolutely what was going on. I think with what went on before the race, that Jose Ortiz, regular rider, was certainly being a little cautious at the gate, getting into the gate, getting out of the gate, and taking him around. I don't think he ever had any question about winning the race. And I think there is not only a learning curve for Independence Hall and maturing and all that Tappet stuff coming out of him, but I think there's a learning curve for the human connections also, how they're going to handle him. Quite frankly, I think they feel like they maybe gave him a little bit too much time in between races. They were maybe afraid of the bounce theory after that big race. And clearly, to me, the 2 months was too much. He needs to get that energy out on the racetrack. I don't think we'll see 2 months between races again from him.
Oh, that's interesting. You point that out, Matt, and that could really help him in my eyes as moving forward. Now, you want a horse who's, I guess, fresh to an extent where they can handle if they're able to run in each leg of the Triple Crown, but. A horse that needs to be on the track a little bit more might help him get over some of the issues we were talking about getting before the race, and then being able to break a little bit better. Having said that, it wasn't the Nashua as far as just overpowering and buyer speed figure. Anything you want to look at, it wasn't the same as the Nashua. But on the other hand, all in all, with the bad break and the way he ambled up on horses on the outside, and then the way he pretty much dominated in the stretch. It was another performance where you'd say this horse has a lot of talent, and probably there's room to improve for Independence Hall. Again, it's on a Constitution, the hot first-year sire of last year. This is his first crop. He's had a lot of good horses, and Independence Hall might be the most talented of the bunch.
Could be. He's on his way to Florida, to Tampa Bay Downs, where he will be stabled as the connections decide upon the next race. It could be there at Tampa in the Sam F. Davis, or as they said, there are so many options of races down there. They'll run him next when he's kicking down the barn again.
Yeah, well, for now, Independence Hall is a two-time stakes winner in New York and 3-for-3 lifetime, and certainly a major contender for the Kentucky Derby. Glad you got to see him and everything that surrounded the race in the Jerome there, Matt. All right, let's move on to the races that are going to happen on Saturday. We got 2 one-mile Kentucky Derby prep stakes races on both coasts. First, we're going to go down to South Florida. I think that's the deeper field. At least it's a field of horses we know a little bit more about, although I think the favorite, Chance It, a son of a currency swap for trainer Southie Joseph, is still somewhat of an unknown commodity to most of us, Matt. Gulfstream Park, of course, is one of the places you really want to be starting this time of year up until we move north and really close to the Kentucky Derby. But as 2-year-olds go, generally, it's not a hotbed of hot 2-year-olds, but Chance It ran 5 times during the summer and into the early fall. I guess his last race would have been just into early fall. We haven't seen him now for over 3 months, but he was an impressive horse as he went along. And then his last race, which was the In Reality division of the Florida Sire Stakes, was most impressive.
Yes, and like you said, it's an interesting field in the Mucho Macho Man, which I will describe as a prep race for the prep races, being that this is not a points race, but you've got a field of horses in here, and their connections are trying to see if they've got one that will be ready to go on to the Holy Bull or the Fountain of Youth. And at Gulfstream Park, it's a 1-turn mile. We've got not only Chance It, but there is another Florida bred in there that's a winner of one of those Stallion Series races there for Kelly Breen in As Seen on TV, who looked good and has some experience in there from some stakes races and maiden at Monmouth and then at Florida, along with some others that we need to talk about.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons I said the Mucho Macho Man was the deeper race, depth of quality or proven quality than the Sham, I think, is it's an interesting mix. You have horses coming from Kentucky, from New York, from Florida by way of New Jersey. You have horses coming from turf. You have horses coming from dirt. Chance It deserves favoritism off what he did earlier in his 2-year-old season. But like I said, he's been away for over 3 months. I think if he runs back to his last race, he's strictly the one to beat in here. 9-5 on the morning line. I think there are interesting horses. And it's also an interesting race because you have horses coming out of distance races. You have horses coming out of sprints. You mentioned the morning line second choice, as seen on TV, a son of Looking at Lucky, first time out winner, competitive in stakes races, both at Monmouth and then a stakes winner at Gulfstream. So as seen on TV, certainly is the now horse, I guess, in this group, but he's never done anything but 6 furlongs. I don't know if he's a Kentucky Derby horse. He's bred like he could run longer, but we don't know yet. So it'll be interesting to see if he goes, how he does at the stretch out to a mile here at Gulfstream Park. But I think even beyond him, some of the horses who are third choice or worse on the morning line really have some potential to be horses that could be 2-turn horses and really make some noise on this Kentucky Derby stretch. Let's talk a little bit about South Bend, Matt, the son of Algorithms, a Sagamore runner, because he was bet last time in the Kentucky Jockey Club, which is one of the bigger 2-year-old races in the state of Kentucky. But he really didn't fire that day.
No, he didn't. And like you said, Brian, he was 3 for 3. He had a stakes win at Churchill Downs heading into that Kentucky Jockey Club. But as you remember, it turned out to be a pretty sloppy track in there. South Bend finished 6th in there, never really a contender in that race. On the morning line, at 9-2, that's a pretty attractive odds for me to consider in there. I might be at those odds be willing to draw a line through that sloppy race in the Kentucky Jockey Club.
Yeah, I actually think he's got a real shot in here. He's never missed any training, and if you really look at those first 3 races. A maiden win at Churchill, an allowance win at Keeneland, a stakes win at Churchill. He was beating good horses. Horses have come out of those races and have done really well, both in the maiden race and then the Street Sense, the stakes race he won. Horses have gone on to win graded stakes out of there. So I think, in fact, that one of the horses he beat returned and beat him in the Kentucky Jockey Club, Silver Prospector. But South Bend, you say, okay, it wasn't his day on the slop. Those first 3 races look awfully good to me, and I think there's a lot of reason to like him. 9-2, I'm a little bit dubious if he's that much higher than both Chance It. Chance It'll get bet for sure. I'm a little surprised that he's that much higher than As Seen on TV on the morning line. I think South Bend, if he's at those odds, is definitely worth a play, and a horse who there's every reason to think he can bounce back. One of my favorite betting ploys is when a horse, for whatever reason, threw in a bad race in the last, and he's better than that. These are young horses. We're not sure, but there's enough there. The horses he's beaten, South Bend would look like a horse who is better than his last start. Matt, Inter Miami, Sole Volante, who's 2 for 2 on the turf, are both coming off really nice wins. One in a maiden claiming race, one in a stakes race on turf. They certainly, off their last performance, could be dangerous. But there's another horse in here I want to talk about a little bit, and that's a son of Into Mischief called Ashar, and he's a pretty well-bred horse from Shadwell and Kieran McLaughlin.
Yes, and going back to New York to talk about this horse, was a very impressive debut, maiden special weight winner at Belmont Park, made his second start in that Nashua Stakes with Independence Hall, and just got, we know what Independence Hall did in there, and the running line for Ashar in there is going to look distorted because of the margin that Independence Hall won on. And so getting a little time to grow up under the care of Kieran McLaughlin. Like you said, Brian, that horse could turn out to be a good one. Probably will rebound from that race in the Nashua, and going to be good odds, 10-1 on the morning line. That's going to make that horse attractive.
Yeah, he's actually the horse I want to bet in here, Matt, at the odds. I'll play him with Chance It and South Bend for sure. Ashar, his maiden race at New York, I believe he ran 122 and change there in his debut performance, winning a maiden race in New York. He was actually the favorite in the Nashua, and I don't know, a little headstrong, a little bit between horses. It just didn't look like, for whatever reason, it was his day. Granted, I don't think he was going to touch Independence Hall in the Nashua. I'm not saying that, but I think he didn't run his race in there. So he's another one of those horses, kind of like South Bend, with less proven already, that you should get real nice odds on just because of the last race. And you mentioned the distance beaten. It looks a little crazy because of what Independence Hall did that day, but I think Ashar's a horse who can bounce back. How about you, Matt? Who are you liking in the Mucho Macho Man?
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian. I think Ashar is going to be the most attractive price, but I guess I like South Bend the best in there, and I agree with you, Brian. I don't see South Bend being 9-2 in there. I don't really see him being the third choice in there. But South Bend's going to be my pick, and as you said, I will certainly use him with Ashar and Chance It.
Yeah, Chance It. Okay, so Matt and I are talking about the same three horses. Now, Chance It, I talked about maybe a little disrespect earlier, or hinted at a little disrespect, because he was running strictly at Gulfstream Park, and those stakes races were Florida Sire Stakes races, but they were good enough to think that he might be the real deal. So Matt and I certainly aren't throwing him out as the favorite. But again, we're looking for some odds in here. And South Bend and Ashar make a lot of sense coming off of races where we both think they are better than what they showed in their last race. All right, so that's the Mucho Macho Man. Again, it's a 1 mile race at Gulfstream Park on Saturday. It's race 10 at Gulfstream Park. They have a few stakes races there at Gulfstream Park. We're going to go to another Stronach-owned track. We're going to go out to Santa Anita next for the Sham. Matt, we were hoping that Honor AP, a maiden winner we've been talking about a little bit in Kentucky Derby talk that we do, was going to be in here. But unfortunately, the John Sheriff's trainee had a little physical setback. We don't know how long that's going to keep him out. But as of now, no Honor AP, and certainly no Honor AP in the Sham. This one is also a mile. This is Santa Anita on Saturday. It's race 5 there at Santa Anita. And I look at the past performances of these horses, and, I didn't really need to look at the trainer of the top two without guessing. Boy, I bet these are Bob Baffert trained horses. The odds, they're both expensive horses, and they both broke their maiden impressively.
Yeah, and they both come from very good ownership groups, clients of Baffert, Authentic, Into Mischief, owned by SF Racing, Sal Cumin, Starlight, broke his maiden at Del Mar by a length and a half. That was only going 5.5 furlongs. They are going to go a 2-turn mile in this race, so that leaves a little question mark. Not all Into Mischief horses make that jump around 2 turns, and especially when you're doing it in one fell swoop. In there, we got no 7 furlongs in between here with Authentic, and probably going to be the favorite, and a well-bet favorite for Baffert. And why not? Mr. Baffert's won this race a few times.
Yeah. Any 3-year-old Kentucky Derby prep race, that's for sure. You have to look out of California. You have to look at Bob Baffert first. And in this race, it's certainly true. Authentic is the one Matt's been talking about. The son of Into Mischief was a $350,000 yearling purchase. Drayden Van Dyke was aboard and will be aboard again for his debut performance. As Matt said, that was November. 5.5 furlongs at Del Mar. Sharp win, 103 and change. The horse that ran second ran a pretty good race in there. Second and third, I guess, weren't too far back. But Authentic looked good, looked like a horse who maybe needed a little bit more seasoning in that race, but looked like a talented horse, 5.5. Now it's a stretch out to a mile. And one thing I would say about Authentic is there does, even though this is only a 6-horse field, there does appear to be a fair amount of speed in the race. So that might make you look at the other Baffert, if you will. And I don't think the other Baffert's going to be high on the odds board at all. But Azul Coast came from last in his debut performance, a little un-Bob Baffert-like, but the son of Super Saver, $320,000 yearling purchase, was last early on a wet track at Los Alamitos last month, early in December at Los Al, and came from last and just swooped by. And by the time they straightened out, he was a clear winner, and he just coasted down the lane. I have a feeling, Matt, that Authentic is a little bit more of the buzz horse and the horse that people are expecting big things from. But you can't take much away from what Azul Coast did in his first race as well.
Yeah, you certainly can't. And Azul Coast is owned by Mike Pegram and his usual partners in there. And we know how many really great horses he has had with Baffert. That maiden win at Los Al was going a mile. As you said, it was on a wet track. He won by 4 lengths. This is a son of Super Saver. And we know for the most part, the sons of Super Saver are pretty good on the mud. He went off at 2-1 as a favorite in there, which is a little, not as short a favorite as a lot of Baffert horses are in there. But I think I tend to agree on you just because of the difference in distance and experience and the pace in there. Out of the 2 Bafferts, I might lean towards Azul Coast more than Authentic.
Yeah, and Authentic certainly is the one that's higher on the list of the top touted horses out in Southern California. But Azul Coast, that's an important thing that Matt brought up. Authentic's one race was 5.5 furlongs, while Azul Coast has already run a mile. Authentic, getting back to the odds, Authentic's, just to show you what people thought of him when he debuted at Del Mar, he was 3-5 for his debut performance. There's more in here than Baffert. We should mention, especially I think the son of Twirling Candy from the Richard Baltus barn. He ran okay, decent enough debut performance, but then his second race was pretty nice, and that was actually at a mile at Santa Anita. I'm talking about Tayshawn. Tayshawn is the son of Twirling Candy, coming off a good maiden 1-mile win at Santa Anita.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting, Brian, that in that debut race for Tayshawn, he was in the same debut race as Honor AP was back in that start. So that was a decent field in there, and again with experience going a mile, he had that win at Santa Anita. I'm guessing third choice in here. He is 5-1 on the morning line, and I'd be willing to take a shot on this horse with Richard Baltus, who is a heck of a good trainer.
Yeah, and we should note that is that's the HorseCenter morning line odds. Morning line odds for this one haven't come out as of the time we tape this, but yeah, we figure Tayshawn for Richard Baltus will be the third choice off a improved effort second time out. Nice win at the distance over the same track. Uncaptured Hero should certainly add to the speed in this race. Zimba Warrior has the most experienced horse in the race, has tried stakes before without too much success. I guess he cashed in both races, but never really a threat. The other horse, I think, if you're looking for a little value, the 6th horse, the only one I haven't mentioned yet, is Scoring. And scoring comes from the Doug O'Neill barn, and he hasn't run since June, but it was a good enough first effort. Him and another horse were coming down to the wire. He was the one bothered, finished second, but he got put up in that race. Now he's come back after a little over 6 months, and this is a spot where Doug O'Neill can click, I think. So if you're looking for a little bit of price in this, obviously Bob Baffert-centric Kentucky Derby prep, maybe scoring would be a place to look for some odds.
Yeah, and Doug O'Neill has made noise enough years on the Derby trail. He knows how to get a horse ready for and take a shot in a big race. But in the Sham, for me, it's going to be Tayshaun.
Oh, you're going Tayshaun. I thought you were on Azul Coast, but Azul Coast was your choice of the Bafferts.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to go with Azul Coast as my top pick to upset Authentic. Listen, Authentic, he might run off with this. He might be too good. But I'm going to go with Azul Coast with a little bit of pace set up for him. And I'm going to throw Scoring in as my odds horse in the Sham. All right, Matt, we talked a lot about Independence Hall, both antics and talent. Then we previewed the Mucho Macho Man and the Sham as we move closer to the Kentucky Derby, just 4 months away. We're going to have some good shows for you. I think we're going to have a little break, maybe more than a week off before our next HorseCenter. Then we'll come back with a couple Kentucky Oaks show, and we'll be talking LeCompte. I think the LeCompte down at Fairgrounds, New Orleans, is already looking like a really good race. Of course, we'll be talking about the Pegasus World Cup in coming shows. But that's our show for today. I want to thank our sponsor, the best contest site out there, Derby Wars. And also, folks, if you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel right here on Horse Racing Nation, please do so now. Before we go, though, Matt, I want to get a parting shot from my friend, you, out there in New Jersey.
It's my pleasure, Brian, and it's great to be back with HorseCenter for another year, the year 2020. I don't know, Brian, that's just kind of staggering to me that the calendar has those kind of numbers on it. But here we are, lots to do on the Derby trail, and HorseCenter will be there for you. And as always, I want to thank our producer, Brett Workman, for putting together the show.
See, Matt, that's why I get the closing, the parting shot from you. You always have slightly deeper thoughts than I do. 2020 on the calendar. That's where we are, still doing HorseCenter and still enjoying every moment of it. Folks, I hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you here again in a little over a week.